History is not always written by the victors, sometimes it is written by those who dare to expose the truth, no matter the cost. What you are about to read is a chronicle of such a moment, a political showdown so seismic it redrew the geopolitical map forever. It is a story of how unchecked arrogance collided with quiet, steely resolve on the world's biggest stage. If you believe that courage can topple empires and that truth is the ultimate weapon, then you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below, because this is a story you will not want to miss. The air in the Oval Office on that sweltering June afternoon in 2025 was thick enough to be cut with a letter opener. President Donald Trump, halfway through his second and final term, paced the presidential seal woven into the rug, his face a mask of thunderous rage. His frustration had been simmering for months, a low boil that was finally erupting into a full-blown geyser of fury. The object of his ire was a man half a world away, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young, defiant leader of Burkina Faso. This African kid is making a fool of me, Trump bellowed, slamming his fist on the resolute desk. The porcelain souvenir on its edge rattled precariously. First, he kicks our people out. Now, I'm hearing from Macron, from Scholz, they are all saying the other African leaders are getting ideas. They are copying him. Steve Bannon, recently reinstated as a senior strategic advisor after a political exile, watched his boss with a thin, knowing smile. He had seen this kind of presidential fury before and knew precisely how to channel it. He let the silence hang for a moment before speaking. So, handle it, Mr. President. Show them who's in charge. How, Steve? Send the drones. The media would have a field day. No. Something more direct. More personal, Bannon said, leaning forward. Invite him into the arena. Your arena. Challenge him to a live, one-on-one debate on Fox News. Let the world watch you dismantle him on national television. Trump stopped pacing. A slow, predatory grin spread across his face. The sheer audacity of it appealed to his showman's instincts. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I'll humiliate him. I'll expose him as the tin-pot dictator he is and show that America will not tolerate this level of disrespect. The call was placed immediately. On the other end of the line, in a modest office in Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré listened as the most powerful man in the world spoke with a voice dripping with false cordiality. Ibrahim, my young friend. Trump's voice boomed over the speakerphone. Big fan of what you're doing over there. Big fan. How about a little chat? Live on Fox News. You and me. Clear up some of these misunderstandings between our great nations. Traoré's expression remained unreadable, but a glint appeared in his eyes. He motioned to his aide, who discreetly activated a recording device. Mr. President, Traoré replied, his voice calm and steady. It would be an honor to discuss the future of Africa-America relations publicly. I accept. After the call ended, Traoré turned to his most trusted advisor, Dr. Kimi Adebayo. He has no idea what he has just done, Traoré said, a quiet intensity in his voice. Adebayo looked concerned, but Traoré held up a hand. Prepare the files. All of them, he commanded. The lion has invited the goat into his den, forgetting the goat has horns. *** In the sterile, fluorescent-lit conference rooms of the Eisenhower Executive Office building, Team Trump's preparation for the debate was less a strategic session and more a festival of self-congratulation. The mood was buoyant, tinged with the cruel certainty of a cat preparing to toy with a mouse. Stephen Miller, the architect of Trump's most controversial policies, stood before a whiteboard, scrolling attack vectors with a black marker. The narrative is simple, Miller said, his voice clipped and devoid of emotion. We frame him as an illegitimate usurper. We hit him on terrorism stats, on poverty, on the military coup that brought him to power. We question the very idea that a country like Burkina Faso can even produce a legitimate leader. He circled the words poverty and coup with aggressive finality. We will systematically dismantle the myth of the strong African leader. By the time we are done, he'll be a global laughingstock. A junior aide chimed in, Sir, our intel on Traoré himself is a bit thin. He seems to keep a low profile. Trump, who had been observing from the head of the table, laughed dismissively. Thin. Perfect. It means he's a nobody. A blank slate. I'll paint the picture. I'll show the world that these countries are utterly irrelevant on the world stage. That America, and only America, determines who is a leader and who is a footnote. Their entire strategy was built on a foundation of racial prejudice and a profound underestimation of their opponent. They never once considered that Traoré might be preparing for anything other than a political debate thousands of miles away in a secure, soundproofed bunker beneath the presidential palace in Ouagadougou. A very different kind of preparation was underway. There was no laughter here. The air was cold and charged with the gravity of their task. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood with his advisor, Dr. Adebayo, and his intelligence chief, Major Sawadago, before a large digital display. It wasn't filled with talking points, but with a web of intercepted communications, financial transfers, and classified documents, the fruits of a patient and highly sophisticated intelligence operation. Major. Report, Traoré commanded, his eyes fixed on a file labeled Project Nightingale. Sir, we have it all, Major Sawadago replied, his voice low and steady. 46 separate conversations where Trump uses extremely offensive and racist language when referring to African leaders. This includes the December call where he referred to them as monkeys in suits and another where he told the British Prime Minister that all of Africa should be recolonized. He swiped the screen and transcripts scrolled by, filled with words of pure venom and the destabilization operations. Traoré asked, fully documented, Mr. President. We have the signed Directive for Operation Free Africa. He personally approved a budget of $340 million to fund opposition groups, incite civil unrest, and execute coups in any African nation that pivots towards China or Russia. Your name, sir, is on a priority list for neutralization. Dr. Adebayo, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, her voice laced with trepidation. Ibrahim, are you sure about this? Exposing this won't just cause a diplomatic crisis, it will be a geopolitical earthquake. The fallout will be uncontrollable. Traoré turned from the screen to face her. His expression was hard as granite. The crisis already exists, Kimi. The earthquake is already happening beneath our feet. Trump has declared an unofficial war on the sovereignty of Africa. He has been underestimating us for a very long time. He looked back at the screen, at the face of the American president. It is time to teach him that actions have consequences. The evening of May 29, 2025, arrived crackling with an energy that felt more like the preamble to a heavyweight title fight than a political debate. In the Fox News studios in New York, the lights were blindingly hot. President Donald Trump, adjusting his signature red tie, exuded an almost radioactive confidence. He joked with the producers and gave Sean Hannity a thumbs up, convinced that the night would be a triumphant spectacle of his own making, a public execution of a minor African leader who had dared to step out of line. On the other side of the world, in his quiet, dignified office in Ouagadougou, Captain Ibrahim Traoré was a study in stillness. Dressed in his military uniform, he sat serenely behind his desk. There were no notes in front of him, only a slim, unassuming briefcase at his side. He was not preparing for a performance, he was preparing to pull the pin on a grenade. Good evening, America, Sean Hannity began, his face beaming from millions of screens. Tonight, we have a historic showdown, a true clash of visions between President Donald Trump and President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso over the very future of America-Africa relations. The screen split, showing Trump in the plush, high-tech studio and Traoré in his simple, almost Spartan, presidential setting. Hannity turned to Trump. Mr. President, many Americans want to know, how do you intend to deal with the growing defiance from African leaders who seem to be questioning American authority on the world stage? Trump leaned forward, his expression instantly hardening into an aggressive scowl. It's simple, Sean. America first means we don't tolerate disrespect from anyone, especially not from countries that exist because of our foreign aid. He turned, pointing a finger directly at the camera feed of his opponent. You need to understand, Ibrahim, he said, his voice dripping with condescension, that America determines the world order. Countries like yours exist because we allow them to. Ibrahim Traoré remained perfectly still, letting the insult hang in the air. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, measured, and devoid of anger. That is an interesting perspective, Mr. President. But perhaps, instead of discussing the world order you present to the cameras, we should discuss what you really think about African leaders. What you say when you think no one is listening. A flicker of confusion crossed Trump's face. What are you talking about? I am talking about the phone call you made last December to the President of France, Traoré said, his eyes locking onto Trump's through the camera. The one where you referred to all African presidents as monkeys in suits who needed to be disciplined. The studio fell completely silent. Trump's face went pale, his bravado instantly evaporating. That's a lie. A disgusting lie. Traoré allowed the faintest hint of a smile to touch his lips for the first time. Really? He asked softly. Sean, would your producers be willing to play the audio file my team has just sent to your control room? Or would you prefer I play the recording I have right here? He gestured to the briefcase, panic flared in Trump's eyes. He knew exactly what conversation Traoré was talking about. Hannity, realizing the interview was careening off a cliff, stammered, President Traoré, these are very serious allegations, they are not allegations, Traoré interrupted, his voice suddenly hard as steel. They are documented facts. Before anyone could stop him, he pressed a button on a small device on his desk. Trump's unmistakable voice, raw and unfiltered, echoed through the dead-silent studio. Emmanuel, these Africans are getting very arrogant, especially this kid from Burkina Faso. They are all just monkeys in suits who think they are important. We need to show them who's boss. Dead silence suffocated the Fox News studio. The only sound was the faint hum of the broadcast equipment, which seemed to amplify the raw, racist words that had just been unleashed upon the world. Donald Trump's face, projected onto giant screens, was a horrifying mosaic of shock, fury, and pure, undiluted panic. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked like a man who had just seen his own political ghost, Sean Hannity. His face ashen, frantically gestured to his producers off camera, his eyes screaming cut the feed. But before anyone in the chaotic control room could react, Ibrahim Traoré's calm voice sliced through the tension once more. Context, Mr. President. Traoré asked, his tone deceptively gentle. What context could possibly justify such language about democratically elected leaders? Perhaps the context is your wider policy towards our continent. Before Trump could formulate a coherent denial, Traoré continued, his voice hardening with righteous indignation. Let's talk about Operation Free Africa. He looked directly into his camera. This is a covert program you personally authorized, Mr. President. A plan not to aid Africa, but to control it. As he spoke, a document appeared on the screen beside his image, a crisp, high-resolution scan of an official directive. The letterhead of the Central Intelligence Agency was clearly visible. And at the bottom, a familiar, jagged signature, Donald J. Trump. This document, Traoré explained, his voice booming with authority, authorizes the expenditure of hundreds of millions of dollars to destabilize African governments that do not cooperate with American corporate interests. But it's more than just money, isn't it, Mr. President? There's also this. He activated his audio player again. This time, Trump's voice was cold, conspiratorial, speaking to his top generals. I need Ibrahim Traoré gone. Permanently. And the others on that list. Make it look like an accident, a plane crash, a car bomb, I don't care. Just get it done. That was the final blow. The carefully constructed dam of Trump's psyche burst, unleashing a torrent of pure, unhinged paranoia. He leaped from his chair, his hands shaking, his face contorted in a mask of primal terror. No, he shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the screen. Turn it off. It's fake. Deep fakes. It's a coup. An intelligence operation to destroy America. But it was too late for denials. The pressure had become unbearable, the exposure too complete. His mind, unable to process the public implosion of his entire reality, snapped. The frantic denials gave way to a desperate, panicked attempt at justification. You don't understand the pressures, he shouted, tears now streaming down his face, mixing with sweat. America is losing control. These Africans, they are becoming too powerful. With China, with Russia. It was an existential threat. Sean Hannity was now in full-blown panic mode, realizing he was moderating a live confession of high crimes. "Mr. President, maybe you should stop talking, no." Trump screamed, his eyes wild. "I need to explain. Ibrahim ruined everything. Decades of planning, destroyed by an African boy." Traoré, sensing the final, fatal blow was near, asked the quiet question that would seal Trump's fate. "What plans, Mr. President?" "Operation Free Africa." Trump confessed, the words tumbling out in a broken, sobbing rant. "Remove them all. All the independent leaders. Recolonize the continent through puppets. Assassinations, coups, civil war, anything necessary. It was the only way to keep America great." He had said it. He had confessed to planned genocide on national television. Africa should serve America, not compete with us. Hannity finally managed to cut the broadcast. The screen went black, but the silence that followed was louder than any of Trump's screams. He had confessed to crimes against humanity in front of 200 million people, and the world would never be the same. The black screen that ended the broadcast did not bring silence. Instead, it was the starting gun for a global explosion of outrage. Within minutes, the internet was ablaze. Clips of Trump's deranged, tear-soaked confession went viral, spreading like a digital wildfire across every platform imaginable. Hashtag Trump confession, hashtag African genocide, and hashtag Traoré the hero trended worldwide. In every language, from Tokyo to Buenos Aires, the headlines screamed the same unbelievable story: American president confesses to war crimes on live television. The world, which had grown numb to the daily chaos of the Trump presidency, was violently shocked back into a state of horrified disbelief. At the White House, absolute panic had set in. Alarms blared as Secret Service agents scrambled to lock down the perimeter, not against an external threat, but against the political firestorm that had just consumed the presidency. Vice President J.D. Vance, his face pale and grim, convened an emergency cabinet meeting in the Situation Room. The 25th Amendment wasn't just a hypothetical anymore. It was an urgent necessity. "He cannot continue," Vance stated, his voice trembling with the weight of the moment. The President of the United States had a complete psychological breakdown on national television and confessed to planning genocide. He is unfit to command. He is a danger to the Republic. The Secretary of Defense, a Trump loyalist, tried a desperate damage control. "We can deny it. Say he was drugged, that it was a medical episode." But the Secretary of State slammed her hand on the table. "How do we deny recordings of his own voice? How do we deny the documents?" He confessed. In Congress, the political machinery moved with a speed not seen since the nation's founding. Democrats, led by a vindicated Nancy Pelosi, immediately drew up articles of impeachment. "This is not politics," she declared on the steps of the Capitol. "This is treason, conspiracy to commit genocide, and a crime against all of humanity." But this time, they were not alone. Republicans, seeing their party and their country teetering on the brink of abyss, began to defect in droves. Senator Mitt Romney was the first, issuing a statement that read, "I cannot, in good conscience, defend a man who plans the assassination of foreign leaders and confesses to it with pride. My oath is to the Constitution, not to a would-be tyrant." International condemnation was swift and merciless. The United Nations Security Council called an emergency session. The International Criminal Court in The Hague announced an immediate investigation and formally issued an international arrest warrant for Donald J. Trump for crimes against humanity. In a stunning joint statement, China and Russia condemned the supremacist barbarity of the American regime. The European Union suspended all trade and diplomatic ties, declaring they could not negotiate with a government that openly plotted genocide. Across America, the people took to the streets. From the suburbs to the cities, millions of Americans poured out of their homes, their signs demanding Trump's immediate removal. "Genocide out!" chanted the massive crowds that swelled around the White House. Even his most ardent supporters were horrified into silence or conversion. 3 days later, the presidency was a hollowed-out shell. Trump was completely isolated, barricaded in the Oval Office with only a few terrified aides. His entire cabinet had resigned. Congress had impeached him with near unanimous, bipartisan support. the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff had issued an unprecedented public letter stating the U.S. military would not follow any order from the president, whom they now considered illegitimate, when federal marshals finally entered the Oval Office with the arrest warrant. They found Donald Trump sitting in the dark, muttering to himself. As they led him away in handcuffs, a defeated, broken man, he was still whispering the same name over and over again. Ibrahim, how did he do it? 6 months after the broadcast that shook the world, Donald Trump, the 45th President of the United States, sat in the dock at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. He was a hollowed-out version of his former self, his face pale, his famous hair now a listless grey. He stared blankly ahead as the prosecution laid out a case so damning, so thoroughly documented, that the trial felt less like a contest of law and more like a historical formality. The prosecution's star witness was Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Dressed in his crisp military uniform, he testified not with anger, but with a cold, precise clarity. He presented the signed documents, the bank transfers for assassination plots, the audio recordings of genocidal intent. "Your honorable judges," he said, his voice resonating through the solemn courtroom, "I present to you evidence not of a political disagreement, but of a systematic, racially motivated plan to eliminate independent African leadership and recolonize an entire continent through violence." Testimony from horrified American generals and a former CIA director confirmed every chilling detail. The verdict was a foregone conclusion: guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to commit genocide. Crimes against humanity. The presiding judge, a stern woman who had witnessed the worst of human depravity, looked at Trump with undisguised contempt. "The defendant has demonstrated a total and absolute contempt for human dignity," she said, her voice echoing in the silent room. "His crimes represent a return to a genocidal mindset the world swore it would never allow again. He will spend the remainder of his natural life in prison." As Trump was led away in handcuffs, still muttering Ibrahim's name, a new era was dawning. Under new leadership, the United States formally apologized to the nations of Africa and began paying billions in reparations for the genocidal conspiracy. But the real change was happening in Africa itself. United by the shared threat they had overcome, the continent experienced an unprecedented wave of cooperation and growth. Dubbed the Traoré effect by economists, this African renaissance saw trade barriers fall, infrastructure projects connect nations, and investments in education and technology skyrocket. Ibrahim Traoré, hailed as a global hero and awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, was unanimously elected to preside over a newly empowered African Union. He had become a transformational figure, a symbol of courage and intelligence in the face of tyranny. 2 years after that fateful broadcast, he stood before the UN General Assembly in New York. 2 years ago, I exposed a plan for genocide against Africa, he told the packed auditorium of world leaders, who rose to their feet in a thunderous, minutes-long standing ovation. Trump represented a colonial mentality that has never fully died. He believed Africa existed only to serve the West, that our people were disposable subhumans. His downfall proves that the era of impunity is over. Leaders who plot genocide will face justice, no matter how powerful they think they are. In a maximum security prison in a country whose name he probably couldn't pronounce, Donald Trump would spend his days pacing his small cell, still obsessed with the one question he could never answer. How did he know? He would ask the guards, who would simply ignore him. The answer was simple, and it was the lesson history would remember: he was defeated not by a weapon or an army, but by an idea. Ibrahim Traoré had prepared for war, while Trump had played with hatred. One had studied his enemy, while the other had underestimated him based on the color of his skin. And in the end, intelligence, preparation, and dignity had proven infinitely more powerful than arrogance and bigotry, and that is how one man's courage exposed the darkness at the heart of an empire and inspired a continent to rise. The world was changed forever, not by a bomb, but by the truth spoken live on air. If this story moved you, if you believe in the power of truth to triumph over evil, then please like this video, share it with others who need to hear it, and comment below with your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more gripping stories of history, power, and justice. Until next time.